tell me in Q&A. Welcome back, everyone, to the National Research Platforms Fall Training Series. This is the second session today, fourth session overall. We're going to be going over basic Docker and Kubernetes today, basic use of the National Research Platform and the Nautilus cluster today. The next session on September 16th here, not 23rd, but 16th, the next session is intermediate Kubernetes. Whatever we don't cover today, we'll have room next week to cover. Hopefully today we'll be able to give you a brief overview of how to get up and running with Kubernetes. As we mentioned, all recordings will be posted for all the sessions, along with the slides, along with any code examples they may run. For example, today we're going to be running together a bunch of stuff. So the main link to see all the information and the main link where the recordings will be as soon as they're available is nrp.ai/training. And just as an important notice, just like the previous session, this training is intended as a supplement to the official documentation. And while it's current today, it's current at the time of making this presentation, the official documentation is your up-to-date source for any services that we deploy on the cluster and how to use them and what the policies regarding them are. In case we implement new features, for example, you'll see them instantly in our documentation as it is a live documentation. Now we posted a repository that you can follow along with today. Of course, we're going to be typing things together just so you don't have to sort of stop and type. We have the repository here. It's on GitHub, so github.com/NRP, just for the National Research Platform, -Nautilus /Fall 25 training. So if I click on it, let me show you my browser window here. So you can see I click on it, this is what opens. So it's if you visit github.com/nrp-nautilus, that's where we post a bunch of repositories on GitHub. You can see the latest one, Fall 25 training. You can see these are the examples we're gonna try to cover most of today in our introduction to how to use Kubernetes. So please visit this link. Make sure you have the repository ready. We'll send it in chat as well. For chat. Sorry, just trying to navigate the screen here. Here we go. Oh, thank you, Ravi. I appreciate it. Oh, sorry. Please post the link here in chat. Here we go. Sorry, I'm just trying to navigate the screen. github.com/nrp-nautilus. First, there we go. All 25 training. Let me see if it works. And that's the correct link. All right, here we go. So last session we covered Jupyter Hub and Coder and getting started with using them, different images they provide and all of that. One thing to note is that both Jupyter Hub and Coder run in their own Kubernetes namespaces. And what they launch, what you land and what you're able to use is essentially Kubernetes pods. So today we'll be doing more of the same in this call, but more manually. So for today's agenda, first thing is gaining access to NRP and Nautilus. I'm assuming that you already watched or attended the first one of the first three sessions. All of them we asked you that you're become a namespace or a group member. Please make sure you're part of a namespace or a group on NRP to be able to follow along with this one. Please send in Q&A if you're not part of a namespace or a group, because otherwise you'll not be able to use Nautilus as a Kubernetes cluster, so we'll temporarily add you to give you access. Second thing we'll go over is kubectl or kube control. So kubectl is short for Kubernetes control. It's the command line tool that you install to interact with Kubernetes clusters. I'm gonna go over Docker a little bit and what nodes and pods are, how to provision GPUs, how to provision storage, what deployments are, and how to scale and expose links. So This is a webinar link, so chats are, oh, sorry. I think, okay, sorry, my bad, everyone. I thought you can see the link. Now you should be able to see it in chat. Please let me know if you do not see it in chat. After this, going over deployments, we're going to go over batch jobs they run in Kubernetes, and then we're going to go over debugging a little bit. If we run out of time, we'll be able to cover what we leave off for next week. Now, using Kubernetes on Nautilus, uh, like we said, recordings and slides will be made and will be announced on Matrix, will be posted on nrp.ai/training. No, sorry, here we go. So Docker. So just to get started, so Docker, simply put, Docker is a piece of software. It's a platform that allows you to build what we call containers. So containers, you can think of them as wrappers for your environment. So they supply your environment, which is the things that your app needs. So the code that your app needs, the libraries, the OS dependencies, the so on. All of those, you have them in a packaged way that is essentially called a container. So Docker, what it's used for, what it makes easy is that you can containerize, that's the term, for your workflow and your dependencies or libraries and take them wherever you want to run them. So when you have a container, you can run the same container on your laptop, in a Kubernetes pod, in a Kubernetes pod on a different server at a different cloud provider. And your pod was, Docker container, not Kubernetes pod. And your Docker container will always be the same wherever it's running. And Kubernetes uses Docker. In our case, not the Nautilus cluster uses Docker. Kubernetes itself, it does not build containers itself, it runs containers. So Kubernetes uses what we call container runtimes. And the Nautilus cluster that NRP provides support for Docker containers. And that means whenever you're running a Kubernetes pod, which is the smallest instance of running anything in Kubernetes, you can think of it, the pod is essentially a wrapper for one or more containers. So what that means is that when you want to use the resources on NRP, on the Nautilus cluster, you want to use them through a Kubernetes, through a Docker container. And there's already pre-built ones, there's public registries. So you can see here the screenshot is from the most prominent Docker public registry, which is Docker Hub. If you Google Docker Hub and search for Docker Hub, you'll essentially pop up. It has a lot of images. So you can see here, for example, plain Ubuntu images, different NVIDIA images with CUDA support, different OSs, different libraries. There's, for example, Python Docker containers and images. There's Ubuntu, Rocky, Fedora, uh, CUDA, PyTorch, TensorFlow. You can pull them, you can build on them and add your tools to them.
I
And
can help with that.
oh, sorry.
To get more information on Docker.
Sorry. It's because I said Google. So you can build on top of containers that are readily available by pulling them, expanding on them, and hosting your own. One thing to note is that you can host your own Docker containers and images on NRP's own GitLabs, and that is the thing one of the things we'll be covering on the September 30th sessions in navigating GitLab, NRP's GitLab, which is gitlab.nrp-nautilus.io, and how to build your own images. Docker images. Of course, Docker has a command line tool where you can, for example, locally on your local computer, you can run Docker pull and then the name of the image. And you can see here the image here is Nginx. You're pulling at tag latest. Since you're not specifying, it assumes you're pulling from Docker Hub. So this registry. Of course, you can specify different registries and in Kubernetes in a similar fashion in your YAML or JSON, there's an image field for your container that pulls the image. So it's the same semantics where you're pulling the Nginx image, assumes Docker Hub because you're not specifying a registry at tag latest. Now we're gonna take this Docker concept and we're gonna use it in Kubernetes. The way we do that is through what we call Kubernetes pods. So whatever you're running on Kubernetes, the things that, let me like in a simplified way, the things that run are pods. So when you run a deployment, it runs pods. When you run a job, it runs pods. When you have a replica set, stateful set, what they run is pods. So the pod is the wrapper for one or more containers. Technically, pods can have more than one container. But for the sake of simplicity, if you're a simple case, your pod runs a container, you can think of them as uh, like when I say I'm running an Ubuntu pod, I'm essentially running an Ubuntu Docker container inside my pod. And another Kubernetes concept is nodes. Nodes is the Kubernetes abstraction for the actual physical or virtual machines. So the Kubernetes node for Nautilus, a node is the server. We have, like, when we say we have 440 nodes, for example, we mean 430 actual servers, actual computers in data centers, in sites, and so on and so forth. So Kubernetes nodes make up the Kubernetes cluster. So the Kubernetes cluster, it's the one ecosystem that everything runs in. That is called Nautilus for the National Research Platform. And like we said, pods run Docker. And you can think of nodes as the workers, and pods are where it gets scheduled on the nodes, on the workers, and pods run containers. And of course, all of that is based on resource availability. And the other thing here is GPU pods. And for GPU pods, is defining GPUs as a resource is something you can do in Kubernetes YAML. The request for GPUs in pods is normally nvidia.com/GPU. We're gonna show you that in a second. And of course, there's special kinds of GPUs. Those are GPUs that are not the plain request that is nvidia.com/GPU. They have a different naming convention, and that is simply put because those are, let me call them special use GPUs or more powerful GPUs that have more memory. And for those kinds of GPUs, it's more optimized if you request the GPU explicitly by specifying its kind. For the other set of GPUs that is under the nvidia.com/GPU resources, you can still request a certain specific kind of GPU through what we call node affinity. So node affinity is targeting your pod to run on a specific set of nodes based on what is called labelings. So I see a question. GPU requests are made in YAML, but I thought the Kubernetes workflows use Terraform. So Kubernetes workflows and Kubernetes uses YAML or JSON. I'm gonna show you YAML examples. Coder as a platform uses Terraform. So just the Coder platform is what uses Terraform. It takes Terraform, that Terraform gets translated into YAML that essentially runs on Kubernetes. So in the end, to deal with Kubernetes, it all gets down to YAML and JSON, and that's why you run with kubectl, the command line tool. That's how you can provision any resource and do whatever you want, including requesting nvidia.com/GPU. And like we said, if you want to specify the GPU kind for this resource, you target the node labelings. So then the actual host, the actual server labelings. So each node has plenty of labelings that specify many of its characteristics and components and so on. And we have labelings that specify the GPU type on each node. So on top of requesting the GPU, you can specify what kind of GPU it is. If it's from this source, if it's from this list, for example, if I'm requesting an A40 GPU, the request in my YAML is nvidia.com/A40. So I don't have to explicitly target node labels because I'm explicitly requesting A40, for example. Of course, when requesting GPUs, as a best practice, please always delete your pods when you're not using them to free up the GPUs for everyone else, and avoid using sleep. By using sleep here, we mean the actual Unix command of sleep that runs in, so sleep, then parameter is the number of seconds, so sleep 100 is sleep for 100 seconds. So using sleep in GPU pods is you telling the container to keep running for a specific amount of time, or sleep infinity. That what that mean translates to is you idling GPUs without running workflows on them. So please, when using GPUs, try as much as you can to use batch jobs that are scripted to run your workflows on GPUs from A to Z and then conclude. So this way, all users on the cluster can get access to GPUs. Now, let me show you interactively, and I hope everyone got access to the repository. So this is the repository, just to give you another, the link again, it's github.com/nrp-nautilus /fall 25 training. Now, to be able to follow along with this, I hope everyone is set up with the namespace. I see one question in Q&A about joining a namespace. Joshua, please log in to nrp.ai. That's just, the website is just nrp.ai. If you're logged in, please let me know in Q&A. If you're not logged in, please log in at least once and then I can add you to a temporary namespace that you can follow along the tutorial with. All right, I'm adding you right now. All right, so this is the repository. First thing is I want to install and configure kube control. So my OS that I'm running on is Mac OS. So the version I'm running this is going to be on Mac OS, but similar steps need to be followed on whatever environment you're running in, whether that's Linux or Windows. So first things, when you log into nrp.ai, you're logged in, you can see namespaces. So these are my namespaces, right? And the user portal, hey, these are my user links, user info, different things. You can see in docs here, this is documentation, like we said, live documentation. Get access, this gives you all the correct steps to get access to the cluster. So we're going to be following exactly this together on the call. So the first thing is that you need to install kube controls. This is the main official way of interacting with Kubernetes clusters. You can see the install button here takes you to the official Kubernetes docs link on how to install kubectl or kube control. You can see for Linux, Mac OS, Windows, you can see links here. So installing it on Mac OS, of course, if you're on using WSL, you're using the Windows subsystem for Linux. Technically, the OS you're running in WSL is Linux, so you'll follow these steps. You can see here the commands for Intel or Apple Silicon, the curl to download to validate the binary, move, and test. Once you run this, your verification here for following the steps is once you run kube control version dash dash client, it should show you the version of the client. Uh, kubectl is going to be on your working computers, yes. So to be able to provision instances in Jupyter Hub and Coder, you use their respective interfaces. So you visit their website. But to provision stuff with Kubernetes, you're not going to be using the website. You're going to be using the command line interface with kubectl. So this needs to be installed on your local computer. And just to go show you the steps, let's go over them together for Mac, for example. So curl this downloads my respective kube control binary. And this validates the binary. I downloaded the SHA and you can see here the checksum. kubectl okay, that means it downloaded correctly. And now this command here makes it executable. I move it to my good location where it's in path, and now I can see it's in my path and var. I can run kubectl version, and you should be able uh, to visit this, and you should be able to run this command. Please make sure you're able to run this command. Do you have kube control installed? By following the steps, and please send me in Q&A if you have issues getting it up and running. The quick, sorry, I'm just going through Q&A. The quick link, sorry, Kubernetes. Thank you. As you can see, Christopher has reported there's a broken link. We'll fix that. Thank you very much. I'll set in. All right. Hopefully everyone got through this step. Everyone has kube control running. Please let me know. Please send in Q&A. Uh, I have no way to tell if it's working or not unless you tell me it's not working for me. So I hope it's working for you. We can proceed. So the next step, and this is where a lot of users may be a little, it's a little bit of a vague step, is that you have to install the Cube login plugin. This is required. So this is not an extra step that is for better usability. It's a required step that otherwise kubectl and kube control won't work. So it doesn't matter what version you're using as long as it works. It may be that mine is out of date because as long as it works for you, as long as you can get through this command, you should be okay. And you can always upgrade following the same commands, but there's no specific version that you should be running. The next step is installing the kube login command plugin. So one thing to note here is that there are two kube login plugins. This is the one that we link with install kube plugin or download kube login. This is the one we want you to install. So it's int128/kube login. Azure has their own plugin that is called kube login. Please make sure you don't understand. I see someone is saying this is way too fast. I hope you're able to follow along at this point. Do you want me to go slower or does anybody have, let me just ask. If you don't have Cube Control up and running, can you please let me know? Or raise your hand if you're comfortable with that. All right. I'll slow it down a bit. So after you have Cube Control and these steps, right, and the steps for Windows also adding to path might be all right, so this is the link. So now someone was asking about the link. So this is the link to installing Kube Control. Of course, for installing Kube Control, it's a tool that is directly from Kubernetes. So your official guide on installing Kube Control is always going to be the Kubernetes docs, which we reference in the install button here. So this takes you to how to install Kube Control. Always use latest. There's no specific version that you should use. How to download in Windows. So installing Kube Control in Windows. So in Windows, there's two ways. You can either run Kube Control on Windows directly, and that's one option that a lot of users use. Unfortunately, I couldn't get my hands on a Windows system to show you this live, but to be able to run this in Windows, you can visit the Windows link. You can, so curl is available in PowerShell, which someone correct me if I'm wrong. I'm not an active Windows user, but I think Microsoft calls it terminal now inside of Windows. And once you run the curl command, this downloads the kubectl.exe. And of course, after that, the next step is to curl the checksum here. And once you curl this file, in this file, this will download both of them locally from wherever you're running in PowerShell. And then inside of command prompt, if you run this command right here, or here's the PowerShell command, you should see that it shows you that the executable is perfectly fine. It's downloaded correct. Uh, then appending to your path in Windows is if you have a start menu, you can just type in path environment and it shows you your path environment, like an option for editing your path environment variables, and then you can see where the path variable is and edit it and add kube control to it. And the other option is, so some users use kube control inside of WSL, which is the Windows subsystem for Linux. So it's how Linux runs Kubernetes. It's how Microsoft sort of runs Linux inside of Windows in a terminal window. So some users use WSL to access Kubernetes. You don't have to because kube control and kubectl does run on Windows natively. So you don't have to do that unless you have a personal reason why you want to do that, a use case for that. But going through Windows directly is easier to get set up. All right. How's everything going? Does anybody still have any issues? Anybody still working on kube control? And like I said, so if you run kube control version dash client, and this shows you a kube control output, then you have it installed and you're ready for the next step. You don't need the same version. No, there's no preference for a version. Yes. Sorry, it can't be. So all recordings will be posted. So I see your Mac terminal looks different from mine. That's fine as long as kube control is working. So I see a question about protected data, and especially with the health information. If the data is not anonymized, then there's like privacy control, like concerns in using a system like NRP if it's subject to HIPAA compliance and so on. We recommend that you don't use any of NRP systems, as we point out in our docs for that like if you have any HIPAA data, for example, please don't host it on NRP. But if you like, we're always available on Matrix. We can discuss together if there's a way for you to safely and securely work on NRP with your data. But in general, if it's protected data, please don't use any of NRP's services, not Jupyter and not Jupyter AI. If you have LLMs that are, for example, locally hosted, you're more than welcome to use them. And then you're going from your Jupyter instance directly to your LLM access, which is if it's locally hosted, it's not going through our NRP LLMs. So that of course comes to your own personal choice. We do offer the NRP LLMs as like one of the services that we provide to the users. There's nothing that says you should use them as opposed to other LLMs or other providers. And is everything going okay with everyone with Cube Control? Uh, Please feel free to send in Q&A. If you're more comfortable anonymously, you can send in Q&A anonymously. Uh, I see a question. So for my shell, I use Z shell. You can see on my Z shell, you can see here how to install it if you want to get your terminal to look like mine, and you can see there's plenty of community themes on GitHub. Unfortunately, I don't know the name of the actual theme I'm using, but if I remember correctly, it was one of those official themes. If you want to get your terminal to look like this, of course, you're welcome. And for my kube config is old, you can always download a new one. And let me show you the screen. So So if anyone is not done with kube control, please feel free to ping me in Q&A. You can send it anonymously if you'd like that. Then I can slow down before going to the next steps. But your kube config, we'll get that in a second. The next step here, and if you're an NRP user that haven't used NRP in a while, things are a little bit different. So we do require kube login just because the kube config the file structure now requires kube login for authenticating with authentic. So this is a required step. Otherwise, you won't be able to authenticate to the cluster. And kube login, like we said, it's int 128 for slash kube login. So it's directly linked here in our docs. So install kube login takes you here, and download kube login takes you here as well. And this is their official GitHub repo. This is where they have the official steps on how to install. Now, if you're a Mac user, it's as simple as just running brew and brew install kube login, and this installs it. If I remember correctly, brew install int128 forward slash kube login. This should also go through. So if you're on a Mac, you have brew, things are easy. You just brew install. If you're on Linux, I'm assuming you don't have brew on Linux. I haven't heard of anyone who has brew on Linux. This is where you can install kubectl crew. So if you're Mac, Linux, Windows, and on ARM as well, you can use crew, which is a kubectl plugin. So that's one of the easy ways to install it on Linux if you don't want to install brew on Linux. So install brew on Linux, it's very easy. You can say install brew on Linux. You can see homebrew on Linux. It shows you the steps on how to install brew on Linux. So it's those three commands. You're all set after those three. So you can run brew on Linux and directly just run brew install kube login, and then you're all set. So for whoever's on Mac, this should get you through. Please let me know if it doesn't. If you're on Linux, you can either install Homebrew on Linux or you can install Crew. Steps for installing Crew are at this link. So Crew, you can see here. So Crew documentation, user guide, installing. So also on Mac or Linux, to install Crew, it's make sure Git is installed, then one command, second command. So let me show you this since I'm on Mac. So I have Git installed and one command and second command. Now I have kube control crew. After I have kube control crew and I can run it, it shows me the help menu. I can go ahead and kube control install OIDC plugin. And this should install it for me. And then I should be able to use it. And sorry, let me just go through the questions. So kube login authenticates to authentic. It's Kubernetes' way of pulling your information from authentic. Authentic holds the authentication information, so it does authenticate at intervals. You can, of course, I'll show you how to configure it so it's not invasive. It's not causing any issues, and it doesn't. Once you run the steps, it doesn't spawn up new tabs at a high interval. How much need is there for the developer tools to be installed on Mac? I'm assuming, please correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm assuming it's a requirement to have Homebrew to have developer tools, or not sure why would you would need developer tools to be installed on Mac to run this, to be honest. And if Kurt, just want to make sure are you running in a headless environment or in a like terminal only environment or in a specific OS that doesn't have a browser, or because the reason it's failing now is because it's unable to open a browser, which we'll get to in a second also how to fix that. But just to make sure how like is everybody all set with installing Q plugin? For Mac users, Brew is the easiest way. For Linux users, you can either install Brew or install Crew. For whatever platform you're using, especially Windows, Chocolatey, there's plenty of steps to install Chocolatey, but Crew, you can easily install Crew for Windows. So let me show you. So Crew, you just install it from releases. So when you download from releases, the Windows one, which you can see here, the executable, you can launch command prompt with administrative privileges, which you can start, and run command prompt. It'll show you as one of the options is with admin privileges. Go to the same directory you downloaded it. So if it's in downloads, for example, it'll get like CD, which is change directory to your downloads, and then /crew install crew. And then just like how you added kube control to your path environment, you can either add this to your path environment or navigate to this in your file explorer and copy the executable over to your path environment. Or one thing that some of our Windows users pointed out in getting set up in an easier way is that this is your kube login repository page, and this is your releases page. So this is the latest version. I can install the Windows one, download it directly. So for example, this is the AMD one if you have an 64 processor, and this is the kube login executable. So just copy the exe file over if you're on Windows to your path to the where you put kube control, the same directory, because the directory you put kube control in is part of your it's on your path environment variable. So it sees kube control there. You can put kube login there, and then running kube login should work with the next steps. Okay, I see the questions. Kurt, I'm just going to show you the steps, and the next step we're going to go over how to set it up in headless environments. But I'm assuming you do have access to a browser that has your authentic login. And for Tahir, I think from my understanding, you do need the developer tools for kube control. If that is the case, then please go ahead and install them. Adding contacts, we haven't added them yet. We're still in step 2, which is just getting Cube login installed. I hope everyone got through to Cube login. I'm going through the Q&A now. Uh, just gonna, this is from Vikrant. He pointed out if you're installing Brew in Linux, please add it to path. And I see someone has crew not installed, then I'll just ask and please feel free to respond. What OS are you on? So once you install crew, it needs to be in your path, is where your OS looks for executables for your cube control to see it. Okay, so for headless environments, I'm just going to show you how to authenticate. Okay, so for crew, uh, can you please, like whoever has a crew issue, I'll show you the steps again, but the steps are, so for Mac and Linux, this exports your path. So let me show you. So This is for me, I'm on Mac. It's similar steps for Linux. So you ran this command, and then it updated your path, but this current terminal session wasn't updated. So for me, because I'm running Z shell, I know how to source from my Z shell file. And now it can see kube control crew. If you're not sure how to do that, just after you run this export command, just start a new terminal session. So just start a new terminal window, whether on Linux or Mac, and forget about the first one. You can just run kube control here, and it should work. And let me just, so to install crew, this is the user guide. And to install kube login, this is the guide. Of course, the guide to follow all of this is the guide to getting access and getting started, which is here. Also sending it here. So this is the NRP page that we're following. First thing is install kube control. Hopefully everyone got through this. Second thing is kube login, which let me call it roadblock here is installing brew. If you're on Mac, brew install kube login. You should be all set. That's the easiest way to install on Mac. For Linux and Windows, you might as well install crew. For Windows, you can also download the binary directly from releases. And once you download it, showing you this again, you can visit here and copy this executable directly to the same window that you have, to the same folder, sorry, that you have kube control in. If you place it in the same window and open a new terminal window, new command prompt window, you should be able to run kube login. You should be able to follow the other steps. All right, just showing for while folks follow the brew and kube login steps, let me just talk a little bit about headless environments. So for headless environments, right now, the main thing here is that users use the config files, right? So step three in general for everyone is to download your config file and place it in your, so download button, downloads, and you place it in your home directory for a slash dot cube. So in your home directory, so for me, that's my user is mfsada, that's my home directory. You can see here. So this is my home directory, and I need to go to this directory, and that's where I place my that's where I place my config file that I just downloaded. So I downloaded it. It's in my downloads. I move downloads, and it's called config 3 for me because I didn't clean up from the first times. You can see it here. It's config 3. And I'm moving over this file to my home directory. So, and I'm calling it config. And one main thing here, it used to be that each user had a personalized config file. That is not the case anymore. The config file is the same for everybody, and what does the authentication actually is kube login, and that is why it's needed for us to be able to follow along. Once I have my kube login, so see in my cube, I have my kube config, and you can see here I can follow the steps. So step 4, I can look at the context. After I place the file, I can see the Nautilus cluster and authinfo OIDC, which is how we log in. At that point, I have a success if I reach this level. And I can run things like if I run use context Nautilus, that means I'm using Nautilus as my default cluster. And I see Kurt, you're using the args are you able to open the browser window and log in using that code, and the browser window is going fine, but not the. All right, let me try it there. Actually, Kurt, if you can hang a little bit with me, I'll try to reproduce it offline and see what's going on. Let me just get through the rest of the steps for everybody. So once you use context Nautilus, you're using Nautilus kube control get nodes. This lists my nodes. As we said in Kubernetes, nodes are the actual servers. So kube control get nodes, it lists the actual servers that we're running in. Like we said, so nrp.ai/viz. This is where we keep our visualizations. You can see resources. This is the nodes. So this is the actual physical servers. The shell script didn't look for Ubuntu. I'm assuming this is for crew. So for crew, the shell script is dependent on Git. All right, so the seeing that so many users have difficulties in installing crew and installing kubelogin, here's what we're gonna do. So for this session, so today we had the Kubernetes session. Uh, We're gonna post sort of pre-recorded videos with the recordings that show users on Mac OS, Linux, and headless environments how to install Keylogin, and we're gonna post those with training. I know we're running a little bit out of time today, so just let me I'm gonna stop sharing. Here we go.